Good evening, everyone, and hello and welcome to today's Hello Culture Masterclass. It's fantastic to be back. This time, Hello Culture is part of Sign of the Times, a program that's created in partnership with Sign, the Screen Industries Growth Network. That's using public funding by Research England, which is part of UK Research and Innovation. And Sign is based at the University of York. So we hope to welcome colleagues from York and anyone else who's here this evening for what I know is going to be a fantastic masterclass. This whole programme is produced by Lara Ratnaraja and Shirley Benson, and it's aiming to develop and support creatives from underrepresented backgrounds in their creative businesses. So it's very much about content creation and growing creative industries that is really representative and thriving. It's lovely to see you. It's still light. It's 5:30, and my name's Helga Henry. I'm a freelance arts consultant. I've worked with Hello Culture almost since the beginning, and I too, along with Lara, have a passion for developing the next generation of arts producers and creatives. And so I'm very excited and delighted to be joined today by the first inspiring speaker for our masterclass, Iyare Igiehon, who's Creative Diversity Partner at the BBC. Iyare, good evening. Hello.
Evening, Helga. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it seems kind of almost anachronistic that there's a masterclass delivered by me, but hey, let's work it out together.
Well, hey? I think it's going to be for the audience to judge, but from what I've gathered, you've got some mastery there, so we'll definitely be able to share it. Before we get started, there's just going to be some bits of housekeeping. As you will know from Hello Culture Online, we do our best to make things as accessible as we can, and there is closed captions available by clicking on the CC button, which, depending on where it's looking, somewhere around there, I think. There's an option there to view the full transcript, as well as displaying scrolling subtitles, a bit like the news. But I know that some of you might want a full page captions outside of Zoom. That's also available, and the link has just been put in the chat. So 3 options on the CC. There'll also be an opportunity for you to put your questions later on. It is a webinar, so we won't be going live to you, but please put your questions again in the Q&A button. For the it'll definitely get found there. We'll probably also find it in the chat, but do put your questions in, and we'll really do our best to get through as many as we can. And I hope to be able to save some time to deal with those. As ever, Lara and Shirley are on the chat, and anything that you find, anything that's mentioned that we think will be of interest, I know Lara and Shirley do a fantastic job of finding the links and letting you see them in real time, so we can really go for the full multimedia, multi-platform experience. No expense spared. Iyare, I think that's everything. Any questions, just pop them in the chat, and any questions for Iyare, pop them in the Q&A. But let's talk about your current role,
sure.
Creative Diversity Partner at BBC. Right, I think you're going to tell us what that entails, but there's always a show is always better than tell. I understand we're going to have a little montage that Gareth is going to put up for us that will give people a real flavour of the sorts of things that you're doing in your current role at the BBC. So should we cut to that first, and then we'll chat after? Cue Gareth.
This is a reminder, Katie. It's time for you to get Ralph a beer.
It's different.
What is?
Being married.
I know if you're doing it right.
There's no rule book, is there?
One day at a time.
Love is the best. It must be love, love, love.
Welcome to Waterloo Road, where we pride ourselves in exceptional standards of education. 1, 2, 3, 4!
Introducing Waterloo Road!
Hey, you, our friend. What would you say to those that call us racist?
Je parle pas anglais en fait. Est-ce que quelqu'un parle français?
You don't even speak English. I knew it. I can't understand him. I knew a brother would never need them.
Parler français et anglais?
Il est un racist!
Il est raciste?
Yeah, him. Definitely. He's a racist, bro. Him. Yes.
T'es raciste toi?
Ignore this man. Ignore him. He's not here, right?
Put that makeup away.
Just accept it. You're clapped in it.
Tell that boy to shut up.
Outcomes for excluded children aren't good. Brews don't work.
What's made you say that? Some people do have just like too much energy in it.
Like who? You're a menace to society.
You underestimate my youths, man.
Yeah, all right, thank you. That's so that's just 3 of the programs you've been involved in. Waterloo Road, Man Like Mabeen, and PRU, or PRU.
A bit of Ralph and Katie at the beginning as well.
And a little bit of Ralph and Katie, I do beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So,
No.
why is diversity so important for the BBC?
Well, essentially what it boils down to is that the BBC serves all of the licensed players across the country.
Yeah.
And so we have a responsibility and a duty to kind of reflect all of those license fee payers. And everyone is essentially paying that fee. And so everybody should see themselves reflected in the output, and people should be comfortable that they are represented in authentic and true ways. So that's a lot of what our diversity effort is about, is essentially delivering on what we're here to do, which is serve the great British public. So that's what most of it is. That's what it is for the BBC, is that's the job. So, everybody has to see themselves reflected.
Yeah. And your specific role as creative diversity partner, so you'll have had an involvement in all of those programs and more that we've seen. Tell us a little bit about, but you're not specifically the producer or the director of those shows, or even the commissioner, is that right?
No. So
what's your role in that bit?
So essentially, if you think about our commissioners and our suppliers, essentially I'm there to support them with where their role in creating content interfaces with the D&I agenda. So sometimes that's explaining what we mean by socioeconomic diversity. Sometimes that's about helping to recognize opportunities to be more inclusive in recruitment onto productions. Sometimes that's about understanding, helping people pass language as language evolves, and helping people kind of adapt to that and integrate those sort of changes into the way that the scripts are coming out. It's lots of different sorts of day-to-day. So today is sitting in meetings with the suppliers of commissioned programs and talking about how they're going to deal with certain aspects of the requirements around D&I. Sometimes, last week I listened to lots and lots of applications for the Audio Lab program. Sometimes it's watching programs and seeing what they're saying, so it's very varied, but ultimately it lives in that sort of interface, in that intersection between creating content and the diversity agenda.
Right. And well, I should imagine that there are some people who think that there's more than enough of that. Thank you very much. But I think it's important also to kind of be aware that so you're not just making, you're involved in it's all the drama outputs and increasingly some audio output. Scripted drama.
So I do in TV, I support scripted. So that is typically drama, comedy, film, BBC film. And then I also support BBC Sounds, radio and music.
Right. so I suppose what I wanted to say is, so those ones where you've particularly worked on, obviously Ralph and Katie, a show about young adults with Down syndrome who are in a relationship. You know, they're the, as it were, the protected characteristics are kind of writ large. They're not. That's not just about that. It's about their relationship. It's about their family. It's about a whole streak of things. But you might have something to do with you. I suppose what I'm saying is you don't have to do things about Black, brown, disabled, or poor people. You are going to look at that inclusivity right across the piece.
So a lot of what we're doing is that, so we've got these shows where some inclusive characteristic is at the core of the story, and those are those shows. And then we've got shows that are like broader, where maybe the sort of inclusion or the characteristic that's kind of relates to inclusion isn't the center of the story, and it's about making sure that the worlds in which those stories are kind of occur are inclusive worlds as well. Some of it, a lot of it is about, like, you know, updating and keeping up with language. So the way that we, you know, so the stories may not feature a lot of diverse characteristics or diverse visible diversity, but again, when things are referred to, is making sure that that's done in ways that are kind of keeping up with what we, you know, what our audiences would expect.
And escaping, I think, going beyond, as it were, stereotypes. So
absolutely.
So obviously there's a lot. You've already mentioned you're working with external, you know, commissioned production companies. You're working on work that's made within the BBC. A lot of collaboration. What are the pressures around that collaboration? So
one, I guess the first thing is that, obviously, you know, as that inclusion kind of the person who's kind of put in that role, then one of the things, I guess one of the pressures is being able to kind of deliver for everyone. You know, so people will reach out to you and say, I've got this inclusive idea for a program. It's exactly what the BBC needs. This is what you guys should be doing. And so a lot of the time is kind of being able to deliver for everyone. Sometimes certain things are easier to support when people come to you than other things, you know. So, you know, sometimes someone will come to you and they'll say, like, listen, I want a commission in drama. I want BBC to commission my program. Well, you know, the commissioning process at its fastest is taking about 3 years.
Right.
You know, and the reality of when the BBC commissions a drama program, they're committing to spending millions of pounds. So when someone comes in and says, I want a drama commission because I've got this idea, and you guys say you're interested in diversity and it's an inclusive idea, so give me my commission, what you're actually saying to me is that I want millions of pounds, give it to me now. And as you might expect, I'm not able to necessarily deliver that straight away for people, if ever. And then there are other people who are coming in saying, I really want to work in this industry. I need to kind of, I want to meet more people, you know, I know that you don't, okay, so those sorts of requests and things are easier to kind of deliver. But I think one of the most challenging thing is kind of meeting people's expectations and delivering for people is big challenges.
And we'll get on to how you got to this position and some of the things that you the networks and the opportunities that you built and had a bit later in the conversation. But yes, it strikes me that what you're still looking for is programs and a setup that has got that's got universal appeal, that can carry that program. As you say, people coming with an idea. You mentioned earlier, it's like, a female boxer who happens to be Muslim, or, you know, it's like, well, that's an idea. That's not a program. That's not a pitch, is it? That's just, as you said earlier, it's barely a character.
Yeah, I think the thing that people got, I think what happens with like a big organization like the BBC will emphasize that, you know, the the inclusion or the diversity aspect of when we're talking to program makers and everything, because we're trying to kind of do what we're doing, make programs, fill those schedules, and we're trying to do it in a more inclusive way. What sometimes happens is that people will not necessarily pass that information in the way that we intend. So no program typically will get commissioned based on a diversity characteristic or whatever. Yeah. So the thing is that a comedy, the main reason something gets commissioned because it's a comedy is about funny, right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
The main reason something gets commissioned is, and drama is about characters and what happens and the journeys that they go on and everything. So what the key thing is that you can't forget, we're not, we're not the British Inclusion Corporation, we're the British Broadcasting Corporation. So what we're trying to do is broadcast inclusively, right? Yeah. So the job is always drama, it's always comedy, it's always those sorts of things, but you're trying to do it inclusively, right? So that's the job, and that's the task, that's the mission, and that's was sometimes, is one of the things that's trying to help people to understand that like the drama comes first, the comedy comes first, right? And then what you do, it's like it only works, and it can only be commissioned, it can only make it to a show if it actually functions as a show. Yeah. You see what I mean? Yeah. And sometimes what you'll find is that people focus on the diverse aspect and maybe don't put the emphasis on the drama or the comedy, and forgetting that it's the drama and the comedy, that's what gets things commissioned. And then and then if we are ultimately, if we're making things with teams that are inclusive and creators that are inclusive, then what happens is they create in inclusive ways. Yeah. And so that's the job. It's rather than, kind of presenting a bunch of different characteristics, it's about delivering compelling, watchable shows, and then and that are inclusive, as opposed to push, I think people get it into their heads that the BBC is trying to push some sort of inclusion agenda or whatever, and it's not. They're just trying to make shows, but they're just trying to do it in a way that reflects what's happening in Britain at the moment. And the fact is, Britain is made up of lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, and everybody who pays that license fee deserves to see themselves reflected to some extent. Yeah, yeah, and reflected accurately, reflected. In authentic ways, so you don't, exactly. And that doesn't mean, so that's again kind of hints at one of the big things that's a big push. So one of the things that people do is that, if you imagine that there are levels to that you progress through mentally to become more and more inclusive, one of the things that happens very early on in the journey is that people push back against negative portrayals of people with a particular characteristic. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And this is one of the things that can be really dangerous, because you think it seems really virtuous and really kind to be like, I'm not going to cast a black villain or a disabled villain or an Asian villain in this sort of this situation. We're not going to just continuously cast them as the bad guy. And you can see there's a virtue in that, but it's also a way of kind of excluding. Yeah. You know what I mean? And in a situation where, like, if you're in a properly inclusive situation, you would, in a properly inclusive situation, if you're from a community, that not just because people share the same characteristic as you, doesn't mean that you're always going to get on 100%. And they're always going to be your people. You see what I mean? Yeah. And that's one of the things that we can push back against.
Yeah, it was interesting. Some time ago, a disabled TV presenter was talking about portrayals of disability on the media, and she said, "I can't wait for a time when just extras, ordinary people, disabled people are shown, like the newsagent in EastEnders. They could be disabled in some way, and it wouldn't have to then be a whole feature storyline about somebody's plucky little struggle against their disability. Exactly. you know, you'll go lots of places and see
Yeah,
lots of different people, you know.
That, like, just, you know, sometimes it's just as powerful to make that the world in which the worlds in which these stories take place have, you know, are places where, like, you know, disabled people would show up, or black people would show up, or British East Asian people would show up, or whatever those characteristics are. And that's why part of what we talk about with our criteria is about integrated and incidental portrayal, because those worlds in which the stories take place are as important as the stories and the lead characters as well.
So if you get those worlds right, you know, we were talking in part of our prep, we were talking about some of the hardest things about getting the balance right is uniting an audience. And it seems to me, if you get that, if you've got the character, if you've got the plot, if you've got that universality, and you've got the world populated in a authentic way, I'm guessing those are the ingredients to.
Well, generally what you'll find is that if you represent a world authentically and you tell a story authentically, so it has that ring of truth, what happens is it will, you know, that truth will ring for lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds. So if you imagine, take the population of the UK and ask people, you know, what their favorite movie of all time is, like The Godfather, for instance, will pop up lots of times. Well, if you're asking UK people, none of those people are American Italian gangsters, and yet they can relate to that story, because it's not the characteristic of the characters, it's the way in which the story is told, and the way in which the sort of universal things that make us all human, and the way that we feel about things, the way that we react to things, the things that make us angry, that make us sad, that bring us joy, all of those things, if they're reflected in ways that feel authentic, then we'll all find our ways into those stories. So that's, I think that's the job. It's about telling those stories in ways that feel true. And even if you're not from that place, or if you're not of that characteristic, there is a thing we can all, you know, we all are able to key into that thing. Does this feel true? Does this feel real? Does this feel, you know, and to greater and lesser degrees, we can all kind of tell when it feels right, even though sometimes we can't always articulate what it is that makes it feel that way, and what it is that causes us not to feel that way, but we all recognize it when we see it.
In fact, because it's speaking to a different part of our brain, actually, that storytelling part goes to the, you know, goes to the limbic brain, and we start to empathize and identify in a very different way.
We project ourselves into that story. No, I wouldn't have done that. No, he's right. Do you see what I mean? Those are the reactions that we have when you get caught up in the story. You start to feel those things and react to those sorts of things as if you were part of it, and that's when you know that you're getting it right.
So, for creatives and who are watching and listening today, what would you and some of them in making content, not even specifically for the BBC, but in making content, what's your approach, or what's your advice about an approach, about a standpoint?
I mean, the thing is that, like, all of the basic platitudes that they tell you, do you know what I mean? Show, don't tell, write what you know, all of that sort of stuff applies, right? And all of that still is as true as you need it to be. I think that the key things here is that, like, you know, things that I've learned over the past couple of years working at the BBC is like a characteristic is not a story, right? And so, you know, and stories have to have their own internal logic. So, you know, and so when you start to think about those types of things, when you think, okay, well, this has to make sense in and of itself, even if the whole thing doesn't make sense. Do you see what I mean? You know, so we might be talking about people traveling through space at warp speed. Well, technology doesn't allow us to do that yet. None of that makes actual sense. But if the logic within it stands up, and you know, and you stick to the rules of that universe, then it can, you know, audiences can kind of suspend their belief and kind of and get taken away by it and transported by it. So I think that that's the key thing here is just to focus on storytelling, focus on drama if you're trying to make drama, focus on funny if you're trying to make comedy, right? And you know, build teams. If you're someone who's coming from a background that's diverse, draw on your experience, but don't, you know, understand that like there are new ways to kind of present that experience. So a lot of the time what you'll see is that obviously like, you know, there are trends that happen, right? So, you know, so be aware that like programs take a long time to get to air. So if you're seeing a lot of programs that are doing a similar sort of thing and you think, well, I want to do that thing, just remember that that thing was happening 3-4 years ago when people were doing that and the commissioners were reacting to that thing. And so like, if you're trying to create things, you're not trying, don't work so much on, oh, they've got this, maybe they'd like this. Well, you've got to think about what they haven't got and what's coming next, as opposed to what's happening now. Is the way that you kind of work your way in, if that's what you're trying to do.
So say you've got, if you're looking at comedy, you can't suddenly go, oh, I'm going to do Man Like Moby, but it'll be a Nigerian guy living in London. It's just like that's
so like say for instance, that's a good example at the moment. So what's really you see a lot at the moment is that because there have been these incredible authored comedy shows, amazing things like Mobeen, like Atlanta, like Insecure, like Rami, like Fleabag, Chewing Gum, and loads of these things. So then what happens is that you know, there are people like, all right, I want to do this author type of thing, and that's great. And if you've got a great idea and you want to do that, that's great. But like, because there's been a lot of shows like that, you might want to think about what we haven't had for a while, or what we haven't seen a lot of it at the moment. So that's all that I would say, is that you're always trying to, because of that time gap, that in the quickest thing, you know, most things are taking about 5 years to get from idea to screen. The quickest you're seeing it is maybe 3 years. So you've got to project yourself into the future and try and think about what will people be wanting to see in 3 years from now, as opposed to giving them more of what they've got right now. Do you see what I mean? Is one of the challenges. That's really, and I think that's both a blessing and a curse for people, isn't it? Because actually, if you're a new creative, if you've actually genuinely got something new and fresh and different to say, maybe you haven't got track record, but if it's distinctive enough, you'll maybe, you know, get helped along. But one of the things that, say for instance, right, okay, one of the things that you know, well, how might that color your thinking, or might that affect what you do if you're, you know, if you're a creative from a diverse background of, you know, you have a characteristic of some shape, right? Well, in general, in very, very general terms, I'm being very careful here. In very, very general terms, representation is improving, right? General terms, right? So thinking about, I want to try and pitch a drama today, I might think, well, look, I might think more in terms of things like, start thinking about when, you know, if I'm going to pitch today, I know that representation and the thing are improving over time, and it's going to take 3-4 years, maybe more, to get my idea for a drama onto the screen. So I might start to think about, okay, what's it going to be? Like, what might representation look like a bit in the future? Do you see what I mean? So, you know, so for instance, you know, from my own experience, if I was building something on my own experience, right, I wouldn't necessarily, maybe, you know, maybe in the future, knife crime isn't going to be such a big issue for young Black men, or you know, maybe there's a future where people might, you know, some of the stereotypes that go with Black male representation might not be so much of a thing. So maybe I won't necessarily make my show about those things. Do you see what I mean? And try to make a point about those things. Maybe I would focus on something else where, you know, where like you know, I might think about, well, you know, the idea that like there, you know, there aren't successful black families. That's people have gotten will have gotten over that by the time the show gets on the thing. So it's okay for me to have a story with a successful black family and make it funny about, do you see what I mean? And make it
100%. So
the drama or the comedy, not about the fact that they're black, but more about the fact that they're a family or whatever. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It might make me think in different ways in that regard, you know?
Yeah. There's a group of they're getting quite famous now, some Muslim hikers, you know, they're ramblers and they're almost, you know, that, so you might move on to a point where there's a comedy about a group of Muslim, you know, Muslim ramblers that's about rambling as much as it's about them, that the fact that they're Muslim.
Yeah.
And not showing a group of, you know.
It's about them, you know, maybe that shows about them as a group of friends.
Yeah.
As opposed to them fighting the national trust to be allowed onto the land as Muslims. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's more about their friendships and what it means, you know, as opposed to it being about like you know,
any
overtly about Islamic representation. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So we've explored your role a little bit, and it really does seem to be a collision of skills and contacts and experiences that you've developed sort of over your career. So I'm going to flip a little bit, and unless there's anything else you want to say particularly about your role, because while you've got this sort of very fancy part, you know, fancy title, you didn't actually sort of specifically train in diversity and inclusion. And in fact, you started out, you know, with an A-level in dance. So dance if you're from the north. You know, how does that, so, and I also, we didn't really talk about, I'm quite interested in how your role for BBC Sounds will evolve and what diversity and inclusion looks like in the sort of radio and sound world. But so you started out with dance and music. So tell us a little bit about that.
All right, so wow, okay, we're going way back. Okay, so essentially, I did A-levels in music, dance, French, and business studies, I think.
Right.
And essentially, I went from A-levels to study popular music studies at a place called Bretton Hall, which is now part of Leeds University. All right. And essentially,
it's where the Yorkshire Sculpture Park is now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It was. That's
beautiful,
where I lived.
What a lovely place to study. Beautiful.
Absolutely lovely. I mean, you know, it's not somewhere you want to get snowed in, but like, it's lovely. Right. And so essentially, you know, I left university. Well, no, I mean, I entered university hoping I was going to grow up to be Sting. You know, I mean, I was going to play my bass and sing, and I left university knowing that I was never going to be Sting. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And so, but at the same time, I'd done very well on the course. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things it helped me understand was like, yes, I wanted to work with things that were creative. Yes, I wanted to work with music if possible. No, I wasn't necessarily good enough to be the bass player in Beyonce's touring band, right? And so what that meant was that when I came back, I started to focus on how I could start to use my experience, my knowledge, my passion for music in different ways. So at first, that meant working in studios and helping people make records and do things like that. And then it switched into record promotions. Right. So helping people kind of promote records to DJs around the country and across Europe. And that kind of turned into programming music for a Black music website. During that period, that's when I started to get into radio, because it's like we were working at a Black music online brand during the first .com bubble. And essentially, this brand was trying to expand to be offline in the real world, and we thought that music radio was a great way to do that. We approached loads of the kind of top DJs at the time, and they all wanted considerably more than we were able to pay. And so we worked out that between me and another guy who worked in the office at the time, a guy called Jason Mitchell, we decided that we could actually present that show. And that's how we started presenting together. And that's how I ended up getting to it. And again, so that's another, it was another pivot, another way of using that passion, that understanding, that interest in music, that ability to talk about it, whatever, so it turned from being able to play it and, and record it and compose it into being able to talk about it. And first it was about helping to sell it, then then it was about the culture around it and talking about it. So that's how I ended up getting into my first stint at the BBC. That's maybe 2002 with the launch of One Extra. That's going back a long way now, 20 years now. And then from One Extra, I went, I left One Extra and went to Six Music for a while. And so instead of doing street music, black music, urban music, I did rock and all sorts of different music that were on Six Music. And then I went freelance for a while. I did all sorts of different types of jobs, everything from making radio adverts to working at the Apple Store and all sorts of different things.
So just to dial back a bit, so you get the Radio on Extra gig, and you have the BBC Six gig. Obviously, that's if you're working in radio, they're really, there's probably you're in the big leagues.
Sure.
How did that feel? How did that feel when those jobs came to an end? Because the reality is nowadays lots of people will not have a job for life. But how did you get over it?
It was heartbreaking, Helga. Thanks for helping me go back to that place.
Sorry.
Really, do you know what I mean?
Well,
let's wallow in my pain for a little while, shall we?
Well, I think we'll glance on your pain.
It was like that. It was like that. It was like, if I'm not the dude on the radio, who am I? It was like, I couldn't listen to One Extra for years after that. Because
it's like a bad breakup, isn't it?
Like, it felt like, looking at your ex's Facebook page. That's what it felt like. I was convinced One Extra, for me, that was the best job in the world. Absolutely the best job in the world. And I didn't choose to leave, right? They decided that they were going to go in a different direction, and they thanked us, and they had no obligation to us. We had a good run on the network and everything. They decided to go in a different direction. It was perfectly legitimate. From my point of view, it hurt immensely.
I think because obviously that's the flip side of being passionate about what you do, isn't it? It's like that's the thing that got you in there. You were clearly able to communicate with passion and liveliness about the music. But and corporations, any sort of business moves on, doesn't it? It's like, it's not, and it's really hard not to take it personally when you put so much of yourself into the role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely took it personally. It absolutely took me ages to get over. One of the things that really, I think the year that my last radio contract ended was also the year that my first child was born and that I got married. That is part of what helped me get over it, because there was only so much wallowing around in self-pity I could do. I think had I been a single person at that point, and had I had no children or anything, and I'd not been married, I'd not had children, I might have allowed myself to not, because of the responsibilities I had to pick myself up, dust myself off, and get on with earning a living for my family. You know what I mean? I just didn't have the luxury of wallowing in my kind of grief over the whole situation. And so I guess, inadvertently, that's a lesson that it's like, this whole, for people who are kind of at the beginning of a career and trying to kind of find their way into the media industry, is that, is understanding that you may well have to pivot at points. Do you see what I mean? And it's not you, know, not,
it's
I thought at the time that maybe if I'd done this or I'd done that or whatever, if I'd been more aggressive about building myself a profile away from the station, all those sorts of things, had I taken the job of being famous more seriously, or something that perhaps I could have gotten myself to a position where I was unsackable. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe those things are true, but like I'll never know, so I can't just dwell on those sorts of things.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Is you make your choices, you do your thing, you take what comes with it, but you just don't take it too personally, and just move on sometimes.
I think that's really important, because I think it's, well, in any walk of life, but particularly within the creative economy, it's a gig economy. People are going to have what we've now learned to call portfolio careers. I think you and I might have called getting by. It's like turning out to this and that. And Yuval Harari, who is the man who wrote Homo Sapiens and Lessons of the 21st Century, I said, particularly because technology is going to move on so fast.
Yeah,
the workforce of today is going to be made redundant by means of technology, let alone creative decisions or whatever, more times than, every few years. The workplace will move on. So the biggest skill we can learn is self-knowledge and resilience.
Yeah,
because otherwise you'll take it too personally.
And I think you just got to accept that you've got to be constantly learning things, constantly adding new skills. I mean, all the time. And I mean, that's one of the things. Like, it's to the point now. It's kind of a pastime for me. Is that like is picking up digital skills. And applying those. I certainly that was a big part of how I managed to find my way into a different kind of career, was by kind of picking up and learning new skills, and being able to bring those to bear in different ways. So,
yes, because you moved from music to film, didn't you? So
yes.
And that was about, and you educated yourself into that role, yeah?
Yeah, so essentially the way that I kind of got into film was I got invited as a radio personality to kind of host events at the BFI, right? So you imagine they work their way down the list, you know what I mean? Chris Moyles is too busy, Sarah Cox is too busy, Trevor Nelson's too busy. Eventually they got down to me and I was like, hey, I'll do it. And so that got me that kind of, so I started to develop relationships with the people in the education department at the BFI, and I would turn up and I would present their events, and eventually I started pitching them ideas for events, and then beyond that, then once I started kind of doing that, then if that led me to kind of that you had that idea for an event, why don't you come and run that event? So they offered me, said, come and here's a contract, come in 1 day a week. And that turned into 3 days a week, and then eventually into 5 days a week. And that's when I gave up all the other bits and pieces. But it was about part of what I was doing at that point. One of the things I did, and I went in, is I was like, look, here you go. You want to show young people how to make films on a budget and just get on with it. Do you see what I mean? And that the idea is the tools are not that important. It's more about the story and the ability to storytell. So I pitched them an idea where I plugged in at the point I'm working in the Apple store.
Yeah.
I realized that if I take this connector and plug it into an iPad, I can put it on that screen, and now I can show a room full of 40 people how they can make their own little miniature movie in iMovie on an iPad with one device that they can make images with and edit them into a story. Do you see what I mean? And visualize things. And that was one of the ways that I pitched. That was one of the sessions that I pitched them, and that one of the sessions that I used to deliver at the BFI South Bank. So that was, again, it's like taking a piece of this. I was at the Apple store and they were showing me how to use their equipment. And I was at the BFI doing sessions, and you pull the two things together.
So in fact, so that diversity of experience, I mean, that breadth of experience, that, if you just singly, if you had been single and not gotten over it, you might be just literally hanging around in the coffee bar near One Extra going, oh, I wonder if they'll take me back. But you couldn't. You had to go out, find new things, get and also grow new contacts and networks. And I wonder if you want to say a little bit about the importance of that in your career.
So one of the things that I find really, really incredibly surprising when I go about so I'm someone, if you meet me somewhere and you say, may I have your phone number or may I have your email address? I'm always like, yeah, there you go, right? The percentage of people who take my number or take my email address and then contact me subsequently is really low.
Yeah, really low,
right?
yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that maybe I did that was different. It's just that if you gave me your phone number, if I asked you for your phone number or your email address, I made sure that I contacted you. Do you see what I mean? I don't change. Everybody who gives me their business card, I don't necessarily say, take my card, right? I don't necessarily phone or email every single one of those. But if I ask you for your details, you can guarantee you'll hear from me. And I don't find that that's the case. Lots of people ask me for my number or my email address. Very few of those, a very low percentage of those people ever get in touch subsequently, right? So that's one of those things in terms of building a network, staying in touch with people, following up with people. The other day, and even to this day, do you know what I mean? I was like, because one of the things that you can do, you talk to young people, one of the worst things you can do right now is just phone someone out of the blue. It's just really
Millennials, millennials and Gen X don't like it. Gen Z don't like it.
So I will phone you out of the blue. The other day, someone's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you phoned because it would have taken us ages to sort this out. We had a 2-minute chat and we made sure that we had a meeting." Part of this business is about networks. It's about people that it's about being in contact with people. It's about the fact that it's all the stuff that happens when you're not there and people go, oh yeah, I know Iyare. I know Iyare. Oh yeah, no, he's great. Just what I mean, that's how the stuff that's helped me move from one area to another happens. And part of that is just literally doing the work of replying to the emails, returning the text messages, staying in touch, checking in on people.
But also I think that's often people won't follow up because they keep thinking they have to wait until they've got something important to tell you or something to ask for, usually a job. And when actually, and I won't get sidetracked, but I've written some material about networking, and it's just about giving value to get value. So actually, if you're as good as the ideas you come across, if I now see something cool that I think you'll be interested in, I'll ping it to you. Like, oh yeah, right. I don't know if you've probably already seen this, but here's a child dressed as a dinosaur going down a mountain on a snowboard.
Do you know what I mean? Even do you know what I mean? Just how you doing?
How's
it going? You all right?
Do
you know what I mean? That's enough. That's enough. And the thing is, it's just that people think, well, what? Why would I be? Why would they care if I'm checking in on them? It's like it's all right. We live in one of it's a tough business.
And we're social beings, aren't we? So just before we and don't forget we've got, I can see we've got a question in the Q&A, but please don't be shy. We've got we'll come to that in a moment, but I'm just encouraging other people while we just because I want to, in terms of that, bringing people together, socializing, giving people support in this difficult industry. A great example of that is the Soul Festival, which you co-founded. For those of you who don't know what that is, tell us a little about the Soul Festival and how it came about.
Okay, so 2013, 2014, I'm freelancing at the BFI in their education department. And essentially what we're doing is I'm watching lots of the other, the freelance filmmakers who were coming in and we will work together to deliver these sessions for young people. Some of those guys would come in and they would ask the team, so can we use that auditorium to show a film that we just made for friends and people in the industry, or can we do this or can we do that? And myself and my partner, who became my partner in Soul, a guy called Nuru Makali, we sat there and saying, why aren't we doing that? All right. So there was that thought on one side. And on the other side, we would get asked by people, how do I get my film on at the BFI? And we'd be like, I don't know, mate. And then we realized, hold on a minute. Things could come together. And so again, it was that whole thing of kind of going, okay. So I remember pitching the idea to the head of education down there, And they said, all right, give it a go. And I remember him coming up at the first event and looking around, said, yeah, no, you should do this on a regular basis. And that's what we started doing, you know. And so we started making these screening and networking events at first. That we would do every 3 months or so. We would we would put an ask out for films, and people would send us films and everything, and we'd put together what we thought was an interesting kind of show. And we would invite the filmmakers to come along, and we'd invite people from the industry. And then it's very much that field of dreams situation. If you build it, they will come. You know, people would show up. Like, how do you even know that this is happening? Do you see what I mean? But people would talk and whatever. And that, you know, gradually, little by little, we got little bits of support from people in the industry and everything. And then after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, we managed to convince the BFI public program in 2019 to give us a slot in the public program. We you know, so we would be up until then, we'd done these quite like, basically they're essentially private events.
Yeah.
They were just at the BFI South Bank. And now, you know, when we went into the public program, that's when it became Soul Fest. Right. And so and that's slightly different. If you're in that chat now and you see there's a soulfilm.co.uk, it's soulfilmfest.co.uk is what it's become. And essentially that's a festival, you know, celebrating Black British creativity and film and TV. We show feature films, education sessions, we show shorts, we give out a few awards. You know, we do networking events, all those sorts of things. It's a film festival. And essentially we built it because we felt it was needed. I mean, we have lots of really great community level events in the Black community for film and TV and things like that. And we felt like there was a space where people needed a seat at the top table. And if you're talking about film, TV culture in the UK, there's no more prestigious place to show your film than the BFI South Bank. I was there a week and a bit ago to see Spike Lee receive his BFI fellowship. Do you see what I mean? You know, Clive Owen presenting Spike Lee with an award. Well, you know what? That same stage is the stage where Black filmmakers kind of
No, I think I think it's really important, isn't it?
That's what we recognized as that thing that we were able to do. And that's not to devalue any of the stuff that goes on. We just saw that there was an opportunity. This is what was needed to add to that mosaic. Do you see what I mean? Our community didn't need another film festival in Brixton or Hackney or something like that. It needed one at the top table at that sort of. So that's what the aim is. And we had to wait a long time in order to make that happen. It took over 4 years of talking to them and cajoling and reminding and going backwards and forwards and everything to actually make it happen. You have to kind of stick at things.
Because it's really, I think what you've said is really important. Context adds value. You know, it's like, as you say, not to devalue everything else. Really quickly, I was sent a link on LinkedIn today with a picture of a guy who was playing the violin on the subway in New York. And actually, if you look closely, it was world-renowned violinist Joshua Bell, who two nights earlier had been in Carnegie Hall, you know, where people had spent $100 a seat to listen to him. And in the subway, he made $18. It's like, so it's content, but he was in a context that didn't add value. He's the same violinist. He didn't play badly on the underground, on the subway, but it was the context adds value. And that was so if you add value, nurture talent, add value, and put people in great contexts, you know, things will shine. And
hopefully. And what that was, that's really interesting, because one of the things that was kind of the motivator was that we just thought that, like, if a filmmaker goes into that next meeting having done our event and they're saying, so what have you been up to recently? Oh, I recently showed the short film that I made at the British Film Institute. We figured that there was power in that filmmakers.
100%.
giving people the
100%.
opportunity to be in that position. And one of the other things that we realized was really powerful that we could do was that we would select these films and show them. And then after a while, we realized, hold on, what if we just gave awards? What if we said, we showed a section of short films, we said, that guy's the best director this year. And this person is the best screenwriter this year, and this person wins our craft award for the year for the best of the other, you know, like costume design or production design or makeup or whatever, and this person is the best performer, and you know, and all of a sudden, and we realized that for very little investment, we could. You know, we could again. There was another way that we could contribute. That we could uplift filmmakers. You know, so you know, it and weird things that happened. That our film festival is now a BAFTA and BIFA qualifying film festival. That's not something that we ever planned.
No.
But it's something that happened because we. Do you see what I mean? So there's sometimes you can't work out what, you know what I mean, what these things are going to do or what's going to be the value of them long term. Sometimes you just have to kind of get on with it. And then, you know, but because you did something, other really interesting things happen as a result. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole driver was is that, hold on, I think by doing this, we can contribute something useful. And what happened is, because you know, we were putting something out there, then we got things back. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's back to this give value to get value, and also that it's that you've followed your interests and passions and sought to upgrade. You know, it's like they could have viewing opportunities, but actually, what would upgrade this experience? What would make this work more and better for people? We're going to be taking questions quite shortly, but so please do carry on. I know I can see we've had a few, but I guess one last one. Well, before that, so all of those things are now takes you back full circle almost back to the BBC and your current role. And did you get appointed in? Is this the role that you were appointed into at the BBC, or was there a bit of a journey to that as well?
So essentially, what happened, I was in the education department at the BFI. I was programming events for young people 16 to 24, and I was doing my soul events and everything. And the BFI hired a new head of inclusion, and I invited her to come along and check out one of the events I was putting on. And eventually, she asked me, to apply for a role in her department.
Right.
And I did that, and that's how I went from. That's how I ended up
being. So the head of diversity at the BBC. Sorry, you said BFI, so that was BFI. So the BBC.
So that's how I got into inclusion. I got you know, so kind of in this roundabout way, because essentially what I'd done is I'd identified an inclusion solution where, like, you know. And so then I started to learn about inclusion in the film industry and TV industry, and was creating stuff within that. And then during that period, the role at the BBC came up, and you know, and again, it's those networks and everything, you know. So I got a text message. Oh, there's a role at the BBC. You should apply. Oh, really? Whose team is that on? It's on Miranda's team. Oh, really? Interestingly enough. Again, when I got my first job in D&I, the lady who went on to become the head of D&I at the BBC, she was doing a load of stuff, and I dropped her an email and said, "Look, I've just gotten a job as a D&I professional. So what am I supposed to do?" Do you know what I mean? And
fantastic.
She said, "Come for a coffee." Right. So I went to the BBC and I sat down and had a coffee, and she doesn't know how inspiring or how much that meant to me at the time, but it was really a kind of powerful, transformative affair. And 18 months down the road from that, a job comes up in her team. So like I got a text message saying, "Oh, there's a job in Miranda's team, you should apply." And so I just text Miranda, she called me back and we talked about it, and I applied. Right.
And I think the important part about that is, they didn't offer you the job because you'd had a coffee. but you were able to find out and understand what the drivers behind that role were.
Yeah.
That because of your research, it isn't. I'm careful to say this because it isn't about, you know, those jobs are open call. They're public call. You know, they're open call things. They're not grace and favor appointments. But if you have a network, you can use your network to understand.
I wouldn't have had the confidence to apply.
Yeah.
I would have genuinely, if I hadn't had people there who just gave me a little bit of encouragement and said,
who championed you.
Yeah, you good. They just told, you know what I mean? Who just stood on the side.
You should do that. Yeah.
And cheered me on. Essentially, if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't have had the confidence to apply. And I would, and this is one of the things that we do when we have, you know, whatever background we have, whatever characteristic we have, is we self-select ourselves out, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Possibly mean us. There's no way I could possibly do that. I don't have the skills. I don't have the experience. You know what I mean? Any number of excuses we say, and you know, rather than, you know, and we get that, you know, I mean, it's like, I hate applying for jobs. Yeah. It feels like much harder work than any job I've ever had, applying for jobs. And the process of going through and doing the research and getting the job makes you want the job. All of a sudden, this thing you just heard about becomes the thing that your life will be meaningless without. Do you see what I mean? You get so wrapped up and committed to it. Do you see what I mean? And if it doesn't work out, it's heartbreaking and all of that sort of stuff. So I really hate applying for jobs, but you know, this is a situation where you know, my personal situation needed me to kind of move things along a little bit. And fortunately I had some people who were really kind of encouraging and told me to do it. And so, and then when you start to kind of go, okay, well, look, this is my point of view on these things. This is what I think makes a difference. That's what I kind of did at the job interview. And unfortunately it was enough to get me the role.
Brilliant. I just want to, my last question before we go on to questions. Excuse me. So we've got some people who are, you know, emerging on their earlier in their career journey. I guess 2 or 3 things that you wish you'd known 10 years ago, or that you'd known when starting out. I think there's been lots already in there, but what would you highlight?
That, like, so the first thing is that you just got to be realistic and practical. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to, like, you know, you need, like, you know, when I kind of made the transition between I'm a radio presenter to what I do now, that transition in all was a 10-year process, right? Yeah. And the first part of that process that created the foundation for that kind of transformation to happen was a bit that I didn't want to do and wouldn't have chosen to do. But eventually, one day my wife sat me down and was like, look, because when I stopped radio presenting, I started freelancing in the media, and, you know, I'd make radio adverts, I'd do little bits of shows, little odd bits of presenting, like paper reviews, anything I can get a hold of. And the thing is, some months it would be good, and other months it wouldn't be so good. And that up and down nature, that feast or famine nature of it was very disconcerting for my family. And my wife sat me down and said, you're going to need to do something else. This isn't going to work for all of us. And so, and that's what I had to do. Like, so that whole idea of, you know, kind of getting yourself into a situation where you've got, you know, you've got that basic foundation, which then gives you, you know, so one of the things that we had to do was that we had to downsize a little bit. We had to, you know, tighten our belts a little bit. We had to pull back a little bit so that we had the time so that I could try a few things out. Does this work? Does that work? Does that, do you see what I mean? Can I do this? You know, so I had to tighten my belt so that I could take a job that didn't take up all of my time, but would cover all of my bills and allow me the time to find the next thing. And that whole process was a process of a few years. So that whole thing, you know, so that's the thing that I would do, is that getting yourself that foundation and, you know, being able to kind of then give yourself the time to try things out, experiment, see what works, see what doesn't, is a kind of a thing that I wish that I'd known. And if I'd known that that was a possibility, there are two things I would have done. I would start work when I was a radio presenter and I was earning decent money. I'd start work at 4 a.m. and I'd be done by 10 o'clock. Right. I'd have used the rest of the day much more productively. Right. I'd have done a lot more with that time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, though, it's so strange. Like a lot of that time, because it was 10 o'clock in the morning, I was free and all my friends had normal jobs and weren't available. I'd go home a lot of the time and watch DVDs. I watched a lot of films during that. And I don't know if it's a coincidence that I ended up working in film as that eventually. You know what I mean? But like, you know, I think I would have been more aggressive in terms of the self-development stuff that I did in that time. And I'd have been more aggressive about, you know, taking advantage of the fact that I had surplus income.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, just, and
I would have saved more. I'd have invested more. I'd have protected myself so that when the next phase came, that I was more ready.
Well, that you had more runway of all sorts, maybe financial, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the questions. The first, I'm going to take them slightly out of order. First one is from Yuvaraj, who says, what advice can you give to undergraduates who would love to work with the BBC regarding radio and radio/television, I say. So undergraduates looking to get an opportunity within the BBC.
Okay, so first thing is really pay attention. There are opportunities that come, that sort of entry-level opportunities. So that's the first thing, is really pay attention, you know, get onto, you know, set up all the alerts, set up all the notifications so you know when these things become available. So that's to be the first thing. The second thing is that, you know, advice for people who want to work at the BBC and TV and radio. So you imagine the range of jobs that represents, the range of roles and everything. So like advice that's going to work for one role is not going to work for another role. All right. So that'd be the next thing, is to do a little bit of investigation and try and work out which area you want to be. If you come to me and you say, I want to work in film or TV, there's not a lot I can do with that. But if you say, right, I want to be a runner, I want to be a researcher, I want to be a script editor, I hope to launch my own series or something. Do you see what I mean? The more specific you can be, and when you talk to people, the more able they will be able to help you, or be able to say, bro, that's you know, there's not a lot of chance of that being able to happen. Maybe you should change it a little bit. When you're specific, people can give you advice or they can give you help. When you're general, it's very, very hard for you to help. And
because
so
you don't want to work.
Make yourself easy to help, and two, take the help when it's offered. Yeah,
brilliant. And I think exactly that, being just saying I want to work at the BBC, it's like saying I want to research dogs.
We're at the BBC. Do you work in drama, comedy?
Yeah, because you could also work. Well, you can work at the canteen, or you could work in the canteen, or work in accounting.
All of those, trust me, all those people. Do you know what I mean? They're as much a part of the process, and they're much a part of the machine as everything. So that's the thing. You have to work out. If you wanted to get my help, you wanted to kind of take my number or take my email and ask me for help, then you would need to make a specific ask, or I can't, there's not a lot that I can do. But if you're saying to me, yo, I want to do that, it's like, okay, well, do you know what I mean? If I don't know how one gets to do that, I know a person I can ask. And so now I've got a thing that I can do that maybe I can help you with. Do you see what I mean? Yeah.
Well, in fact, just very quickly, and I will get back to the other question, but this is a follow-on. So Angel Hillary, thank you, welcome. How would you start off as a graduate job wise. If you want to work your way up to being a football or sports TV presenter, so presenting is like on-screen talent, it's slightly different, isn't it? So if you wanted to work your way up,
if you wanted to work your way up, so there's two things that you can do. So the first thing is that, like, there's a bunch of different places. So everybody thinks, okay, I want to be on, be on BBC Sports, so I'll go straight to the BBC, right? But also there is this incredible network of companies that make most of the stuff for the BBC, right? So I would be looking not just at the BBC, but I'd be looking at all those companies like Whisper and whoever, and make all that content. I'd work out who all those companies are and pay attention to how they're hiring and everything, because that way, that may be a fast track to be working on an actual BBC Sports production. So I'd think about it from that side, not just look directly at the BBC, but look at the companies that are supplying the BBC in that area. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that if you wanted to be a presenter, then I'd present. Right? You just get on with it. So whether that's your own, like, say, for instance, it may be, if you want to be a sports presenter, what's your sport? Are you a football? Is football your sport? Do you support a team? Could you start podcasting about your particular team and become an expert in there? What's your sport? Could you develop your own podcast and get on with that? Do you see what I mean? Like, and I mean, the thing is that people think, oh, well, podcasting takes all of this sort of stuff. But you know what? There's a dude who's developing himself into like a real presenter. He's a journalist, and all he does is that he sets up his iPhone at Arsenal games and does a post-match report at the end of his job. He files his report for his job and gets paid as a freelance journalist, and then he files a report for his own YouTube channel. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that guy's now got tens of thousands of people. Do you see what I mean? And every week he's developing himself and learning to be a better presenter. So that's what I would do, is that so I'd be thinking along those two lines. So I'd develop that in parallel with one another if I was doing it.
Yeah. If you watch Welcome to Wrexham, actually, there's a guy who you see quite a long way along the documentary, and and he's a builder, but then suddenly he does the official Wrexham podcast every week now. And as you say, little more than that, you've got an iPad and a laptop.
And the thing is that even if you're still learning about how to do the job, and developing how you find your way through a subject, or how you find your way from the end of a link to another, to the beginning of the next piece or whatever. So that's the thing, you're still learning, regardless of how many people are listening or not.
Yeah, because you're not, and they're not going to land you straight on, they're not going to plop you straight down on Match of the Day or whatever. I want to move on. So a question from Unlimited, assuming it's Joe, but hello, welcome. Thanks for the info so far. I'm fascinated by the shift between the A word and Ralph and Katie. So moving from impairment as tragic to this is just a hysterical story about a couple who happen to have learning disabilities, which is brilliant. So how did that happen? Who drove that? And who ensured that disabled writers were centered on that process? I think back to that authenticity.
So the way that a project like that gets driven is a kind of a collaboration between the supplier, who's pitched the idea to the BBC commissioner, and the commissioning team, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things, and one of the changes that's kind of happened in the past sort of decade, is that people in the TV business and the people tell stories have learned this particular, what you're getting at is something that people have learned, right? So what we've learned is that, it works in different ways with different characteristics, but you used to see this thing that happened a lot called colorblind casting, where it just wouldn't it be great if we just made this character black, or made this character Chinese or whatever. And the problem is with that is that it works to a certain extent, but if the character has not been written as black or Chinese, what happens is that you start to see these weird kind of incongruencies in the story. And so you might see a character and you're saying, well, they're black, but nothing else about them seems to line up with that kind of identity. Do you know what I mean? Their friends, their family, their lifestyle, their their outfit, it does, none of it seems to work out. And so one of the things that we've learned is that, like, you know, that actually a characteristic isn't a character. Do you see what I mean? So a characteristic is one element of what makes a character, and everything. So that's one of the things, and that's one of the things that changed. And so the other thing that's then worked out is that, you know, we went through this period, and the media, not just the BBC, but the media in general, we went through this process of learning how to tell authentic stories. And one of the things that we learned was that if you want to tell an story authentically about any sort of characteristic, people with that characteristic, with that background, need to be in the room while you're creating that story. Do you know what I mean? The idea of nothing about us without us. That idea, yeah. And that's the big change that happened there between those types of stories and what we're seeing more of today, where you do that thing and you kind of go, okay, look, let me make sure that I put that let me make sure that I get people with those characteristics into the room so that I can make sure that that story is told, and the information, the nuance, the detail of those stories are there, and so that people who have those characteristics will recognize that this is authentic, and those people who don't necessarily have that characteristic will know that it has that ring of truth about it.
Yeah, lovely. I've got 2 more questions. I'm going to try and sneak them both in. Top tip next time, if the questions come in earlier, I can, here's another one. If the questions come in earlier, I can finish earlier and fit them all in. That's it.
Sure.
Another one about disability. When working in these different roles, this is from Eleanor Howman. When working in these different roles, have you noticed anything in place to support people with visible and invisible disabilities who may be working alongside you?
Well,
so what support is there for people with visible and invisible disabilities?
I mean, one of the things that I've noticed recently that's starting to happen is that a new role that's starting to show up on productions is an accessibility coordinator.
Right.
And one of the things that person does in pre-production is asks everybody who's going to be coming onto the production what their requirements and what their adjustments, you know, might be.
Yeah.
And, you know, so this was a thing that nobody used to get asked. And then for a while, it was only if they knew you had a disability and you declared that in advance, that then they would ask you. And now they're starting to ask everybody, right? Because some people declare
Yeah.
Some people don't. And what's happening is that even when people don't have a disability, they might have something where they want that they you know, now given the opportunity to kind of let people they're working with know, they're now revealing and declaring certain things. And I found that asking people what they need and what would make this a better working environment for them, and paying attention to those things and trying to accommodate those things is one of the biggest things I've seen that makes a difference for people. And working alongside people is just asking what would help them. Is what so that would be my answer.
I'm conscious of time. I want to ask there's a couple of questions. Maya and Tao, I'm not sure we'll get to your questions. We'll do what we can. But I've got a question from Pip Rackstraw. What are the other changes you are seeing in the industry that is helping to improve representation on screen or in the media? So what are the other changes you're seeing in the industry helping to improve representation on screen? And what else do you think needs to happen that isn't already there to help authentic stories get out there?
All right. So say, for instance, at the BBC, in the wake of BBC made an announcement a couple of years back where they said, right, we're going to spend £100 million on inclusive programming, right? And what that did is make everybody who makes programs, who's responsible for paying for the programs in business affairs, or commissioning the programs in commissioning teams, or delivering the programs in production, made them start to think, well, what exactly is an inclusive program? What does it actually mean to make a program inclusively? So that's one of the things that I've seen that's a big change, people thinking about what this actually means. How do you do this inclusively? Thinking about that, mulling it over, considering it. That's something that I wasn't seeing before. In terms of what I'm not seeing that would make a difference, I think, so there's two things. I think we need to see more companies, suppliers led by people with different characteristics drive, so what tends to happen is those companies, they choose to pitch different types of shows, they choose to put together different teams to make those shows, and so ultimately most of what gets made for most broadcasters in Britain is made by supplier companies, and so we need to, that's the thing that I think would be the biggest things that we can do to support diverse suppliers, to kind of give them more slots in the schedules, to help them develop and nurture talent. That's the thing that I'd like to see more of if possible.
Yeah. I think we didn't bring it out really, but one of the things you were saying is that your job becomes more effective, and not easier, but more effective the earlier you're involved in the process. Like somebody comes to you with a pretty much fully formed program and then wants you to sort of literally sprinkle a bit of diversity over it like some pepper, it's like it's not going to work. So that seems to be what you've just said, seems to be an extension of that. Actually scaling up diverse production companies, making it easy for them to get in on the supply chain would also be part of that, isn't it? That's an even earlier intervention.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when I talk about that sort of getting involved, is that, like, the important thing is that you don't need to call me or bring me in, but you just need to do your diversity and your inclusion thinking early. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And regardless of what you're doing. So if you're writing a script, right, don't try and reverse engineer, don't write your script and then try and make it inclusive. Think about inclusion and diversity before you start writing, and then write from that, write with that as part of it. You see what I mean? So it's got to be, you can't add inclusion. It's not icing. You can't put it on. It's an ingredient that's baked in.
Yes, a bit earlier on you said to us that if people come to you with an idea that can't be done inclusively, then it's not a great idea. Not the great idea they think it is. It's the wrong idea. Yeah,
it's the wrong idea. If you do this thing and you realize that for whatever reason we can't do this inclusively, and the job is to be inclusive, then it's the wrong idea, and you've gone too far. You need to either go back or whatever, and that's why you want to do the thinking and work your way through. So we've got this idea of thinking this is great. So if we did this, then it would mean this, and then if we did that, that would mean this, and then we'd be in a position where then we would have to then try and put some inclusion in here and whatever. Would we be comfortable at that point? No, okay, go back and start again. Do you see what I mean? And while you're doing it as a thought experiment, that's much cheaper than putting
100%. Yeah. Thank you. I'm wondering. It literally will be one sentence for each of these people, but I'm conscious they've asked questions and I don't want to leave them behind. So, Pam, what are the essential skills beside English that a non-native person should acquire to be qualified to work with the BBC radio/television? Is British accent important?
No. Having a British accent is not necessarily important to being to succeeding if being on air is what you want to do. Obviously being able to having enough of a command over the language that you're easy to understand is important. I think the key thing is the skills and the knowledge and the experience. So nobody who works at the BBC knows everything about everything. So and people make programs or broadcasts about a wide range of different types of subjects. So I would say, one of the best things you can do is make yourself an expert on something. Yeah. The thing that works for you. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And, there are certain things lend themselves to being part of TV programs or radio broadcasts more than other things. I consider that as well.
Brilliant. Also, Shirley, who's our producer, is an ex-BBC employee, very established and very experienced, and she has actually done a very quick answer to Maya's question. So I might leave it, but just to read it out. As an undergraduate working on a career plan, what steps would I need to take to get into a role, making sure content is diverse in the BBC? So kind of after your job there, Iyare.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what I mean? Meet me in the park at midnight and we'll fight over it. No, I mean, essentially, how did I get this job? Right. Well, essentially, I came up with a solution for inclusion for my community, in that I created a platform for Black filmmakers, and that then led to me getting opportunities to develop a career in inclusion, you know? So I would just say, learn what you can and contribute where you can, do something, you know, whether that's, you know, it's a really interesting thing. I met an editor the other day who has created an incredible list of British Southeast Asian talent in film and TV. And, you know, he may well find himself working in D&I as opposed to editing programs if he's not careful. Do you see what I mean? Coming up with solutions that fix problems for people. So think about what's going on.
It's a bit like when you were saying about the person who wanted to be a football presenter, present. If you want to work in inclusion, include. That's really
get
great.
On with it. And that might be a small thing. It might be, it might be like you might start publishing a blog just kind of celebrating talent from a certain community or from a certain background or characteristic, and that's that will get you started on it. But also pay attention to the job listings and what people are actually asking for. I think a lot of people come into the D&I space from HR. So that's a way that you can kind of get started, and it's a way that you can then pivot from that sort of place. And other people come into the D&I space from almost like activism almost. So that's kind of, I guess, my route in. So that, pick one of those lanes, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a great thing to finish on. We are out of time. If you can, I can crave your indulgence for literally 1 minute while I say my thanks. Iyare, hang on if you can hang on after we've clicked our cameras off. I just wanted to really thank you, Iyare, for your contribution, creative diversity partner at the BBC. I want to thank our program curators, Lara Ratnaraja, our producer, Shirley Benson, our tech producer is Gareth Peel, making the lovely sting at the beginning, and our montage, making everybody look and sound brilliant. And a massive thanks to our closed captioner, Wendy Osmond, who, as ever, never misses a beat, and I hope has enhanced your experience. We will be this is being recorded. It will be when it's edited, there's a closed caption video made available on YouTube, and we'll let you know about that in due course. You can see previous Hello Culture webinars and live events at the Hello Culture link that Lara's sharing now. There are more masterclasses to come. The next one is 24th of April, and thereafter the next one is 27th of March. Clocks will have gone back, it'll be even lighter. 27th of March, followed by 24th April, 22nd of May. They're all 5:30 to 7 o'clock, or in this case 4 minutes past by the time we finish. But do keep an eye on Hello Culture website, follow us on Twitter. We'll also, if you're on our mailing list, on the Eventbrite mailing list or on the MailChimp, we will keep you posted. A big thanks to Sign for funding the programme. This has been the sign of the times, and in particular to Pip Rackstraw for her support and her question later on. Iyare, have a great evening. It's been fantastic to meet you. It's been really great to spend time with you. I know that, you've been... it's very clear that you're driven by delivering value, and you've delivered massive value to us tonight. I'm really, really appreciative of that.
I appreciate
it. Until spring, until the 27th of March, I wish you all a very good evening, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. That's it from us. Good night.